Hello, friends. Wonderful seeing all of you after a couple of weeks. I was away, and I really wish you had a good couple of weeks when we didn't catch up over these your YouTube lives. All right. So the objective of today's session is to understand the way in which questions on standards on auditing can appear. What is the marks weightage for standards on auditing, and how you can prepare yourself in such a way that you can score, let me put it this way, all the marks that the examiner asks for. Now, the reason why I want to set this objective very clear at the outset is this session is not for those who just want to do some, inadequate or bad preparation for examination. This session is for those champions like you who want to do exceptionally well in your examinations. And if you want to bring a few more friends of yours onto this particular YouTube live for them to get to learn how they have to prepare and approach. Now, this is directly how examination questions have to be answered. So for that purpose, quickly share the link with them so that in the next 1-2 minutes, they also get to join this wonderful session on standards on auditing as to how you're going to approach it. And as we always keep talking about it, if you have any specific questions, post those questions in the chat segment in the comments, and I will try to answer as many questions as I can in this process. Excellent. Now, let me get started with the broad curriculum, what we have, and how standards on auditing have an exceptionally important role to play. First, I'll talk about CA Inter. So if I look at the way in which the examination weightage got distributed, here the chapters relating to standards, essay 200, 210, 220, and so on, and then 300 series, then some part of audit sampling, some part of analytical procedures. The weightage of all these topics put together, you have almost 20 to 25%. All right, remember 20 to 25%. Then audit documentation, audit evidence. So all your standards in your essay 230, around 230, and then essay 500 series, whatever you have, 5 to 15%. So let me just put it at 10%. Okay, keep totaling up. What is the total till now that we have seen? Almost about 40, 45. Almost close to 35. Right. Now, risk assessment and internal controls. You know what we have under this? We have essay 315, essay 320, essay 330. All these we have under this particular topic. Right. Then we have auditors' responsibilities regarding frauds. We have almost plus, of course, company audit, 15 to 20 marks. Then audit reports, which is also something that we learn as a part of our auditing standards, essay 700, 701, of course, these days, 705, 706, all these appear for 5 to 15 marks. Now, just stop here and think about it. Standards on auditing, what we learn alone, are getting tested for 50 to 60 marks in your examination. This is not something that I am saying. This is what our beloved ICAI has indicated in the overall marks weightage. Now I think you understand why this live session, what we are going to do over the next 1 to 1.5 hours, is exceptionally important. And as I said, it's just we are close to 3 to 4 minutes into the live. If you think there are other friends of yours who might be benefited from it, quickly share the link and get them onto the YouTube live so that they also get benefited. All right. Now, before I take up any questions which are there in the chat, let me first talk about how we are going to do this session. I will take exactly your past examination questions. Nothing else. Nothing else is a better representative of your examination standard than the past examination questions. I will take those past examination questions and we will discuss how you have to approach those past examination questions. Are we clear about our expectation? Right. Now, let me get started. Just give me a moment. I'm pulling out the past examination questions. Right. Now, the first question, this appeared for 5 marks in the past examination. So I will not just keep talking about November 2014, May 2016. I'll not just keep talking about it. These questions are relevant for CA Inter as well as CA Final. There is no confusion about it. Okay, right. Now, look at the question. Inquiry from management is helpful for auditor to evaluate subsequent events. Discuss specific inquiries in reference to SA 560, which might have effect on the financial statements. Now, what is this question all about, friends? You're talking about inquiries in the context of SA 560. What is SA 560? It is about subsequent events. Friends, what kind of inquiry is auditor supposed to do? We know that as per SA 560, there is something called subsequent period. What is a subsequent period? All these will learn as a part of our standards on auditing. Subsequent period starts from the balance sheet date. Say 31st March 2018 maybe is the beginning point for subsequent period. And when does it end? It ends on the date of audit report for the purpose of SA 560. This is one of the areas. This question I'm just getting repeatedly. Harsh, Rajesh, I'm answering for everybody once for all. This session is for both CA Inter and Final. These questions what we are taking, I will take questions which are of relevance for both CA Inter as well as CA Final. I hope you're clear about it. Right. Now, so when I talk about, because these standards we very clearly have, in both CA Inter as well as Final, and examination questions, we will cover from both. Okay, right. Now, listen carefully. So when we talk about the subsequent events for this period, how do you approach this answer? This question appeared for 5 marks. Now, friends, remember this golden rule. When you have any examination question, you know how you'll plan the time. In your BCom exams, I know you will just start writing endless answers. You will write answer after answer, answer after answer, page after page. You just keep filling those answers. We don't have that luxury. We can't do that in our CA examinations. Be very clear about it. You have to be laser focused on the topic. I'm repeating, you have to be laser focused on the topic when you are answering these questions. You know what I mean by that? When you have a question on standards on auditing, say SA 560, you have to first talk about inquiry from management to evaluate subsequent events. You have to straight get to that. In SA 560, we learn the auditor should inquire from the management about events which occurred after balance sheet date but on or before the date of audit report. What is the purpose of inquiry? The purpose of inquiry is to assess whether any of the subsequent events would require adjustment in the financial statements or whether they require disclosure in the financial statements. I'm repeating, whether they require any adjustment in the financial statements. Adjustment means what? Whether they require journal entry or whether they require any disclosure in the notes to accounts. That is what we are basically expected to do. Now, what kind of inquiries the auditor may do with the management? The auditor may check, was there any change in the shareholding pattern after the balance sheet date? Was there any business purchase which has happened, like amalgamation which has happened after the balance sheet date? Because that might have an implication on the financial statements. Then, was there any accident or any such major loss of assets which happened after the balance sheet date? Then, was there any significant incident like demerger which occurred after the balance sheet date? Then you may also talk about any event like maybe the government came and took over the land or property what the company had because it was on a highway, and maybe for the purpose of compulsory acquisition, the government has taken over. That you might want to understand. So like this, you will give a few examples. And come back to the question. Discuss specific inquiries with reference to SA 560, which might have effect on financial statements. You know what you try doing? I will not spend for a 5 marks question 1 hour of time. We are very clear about it. How do you plan your time spent then? If it is, I'm just broadly giving a maths here. You have to answer 100 marks paper and you have about 180 minutes. Even though you have 180 minutes, for the purpose of planning, I want to consider only 150 minutes when you are making planning. Don't think you'll be left with too much of time. When you consider your planning for 150 minutes, invariably it will go to 180 minutes. Don't worry. So per mark, you can spare 1.5 minutes. Now you plan for yourself. If this is a 5 marks question, you have to answer this within about 7 to 8 minutes. 7.5 exactly it comes to, but I'm just saying broadly 7 to 8 minutes is the time what you have, and based on your pace, you just have to quickly answer. You have to start answering these points. Now I can give examples of subsequent events that you might have to inquire into. I can give 25-30 examples. But shall I go on adding those points? Not required. Why? The examiner is trying to check whether you understand what the regulation SA 560 talks about. Then, what are those inquiries that you might have to do? You just gave examples of those. And based on that, you will have to talk about concluding, saying, these are some of the cases where, these are some of the examples where the auditor might do an inquiry to assess whether those events have impact on the financial statements from accounting or disclosure perspective. That's it. So that is the minimum answer what the examiner expects from you. Right. Now, let me go to the next question. Important definitions and requirements from exam point of view. Again and again, I think students are asking this question. Friends, this is for both CA, Inter and Final. And company audit and other topics I will do in the coming weeks. I will do RTPs and important amendments which have happened, which are of relevance for our November 2018 examination in the next week, same time. And today I'm not covering company audit. Today I'm covering only questions on standards on auditing. Please listen to this carefully, because you still have about 50 to 60 marks coming from standards on auditing for your Inter, and for your CA final, you still have about 15 to 25 marks which come from standards on auditing. I hope you will focus more on what we are now discussing. All right. Now, application materials of essays. I'm doing same application only. Listen carefully, Jindal. Right. Now, look at the next question. Primary objective of an auditor is to detect fraud and error in financial statements, correct or incorrect. Now, whenever you have examination questions which talk about is this correct or incorrect, please, for God's sake, don't write answers true or false, yes or no. Why are you doing that? If the question specifically says correct or incorrect, you have to specifically answer in that language only, correct or incorrect. So here, how do you approach it? So now you know the answer, correct or incorrect, you know the answer. That it is incorrect, but how do you approach it? If it is a case study, you will not straight start saying incorrect. This is just it's just a correct or incorrect question, which is for 2 marks. So for a 2 marks question, you should start your answer with your final conclusion, correct or incorrect. So come on, respond to me, friends. Is this correct or incorrect? The point is, primary objective of auditor is to detect fraud and error in financial statements. What do you think? Is it correct or incorrect? Incorrect. Why? The primary objective of an auditor is to express an opinion on financial statements taken as a whole. Right? Primary objective, you should never forget that. Primary objective of an auditor is to express an appropriate opinion on financial statements taken as a whole. Now, this remains whether, wherever the question is asked regarding objective of auditor, you'll have to first bring this out. This is the objective of auditor. Now, the responsibility of auditor the primary responsibility of auditor does not include fraud finding. However, if auditor finds any fraud or any instance of fraud during the course of audit, then auditor should do enough work in order to conclude on whether the fraud really exists or whether it doesn't. Right? So basically, Nagender Hindi mein bolo. Acha, theek hai bhai, suniye. There are people from different parts of India who are not just India, different parts of the world who listen to the YouTube live. I use very simple English. If you don't understand any of the specific language that I'm using, Nagender, just get back to us. Okay. So to be fair to everybody, I'll have to use English, which most of us understand. All right. So now moving on. So we understood how to approach this particular question. Okay, right. Now look at the next point. This is a very interesting case. An auditor's external expert is not subject to quality control policies and procedures of an audit firm. What is this question all about? Which standard is getting tested here? Listen, friends. This question is from Essay 620, right? Where you talk about using the work of an expert. Then this also has implication on Essay 220. What is this Essay 220? Essay 220 talks about quality control. This also has some reference to SQC1, which talks about the quality control. Okay, right. Essay 220 and SQC1 both talk about the quality control, and both references you have as a part of this besides Essay 620. Right. Now, how do you approach this? This is also a specific question on whether it is correct or incorrect. First, it is correct. Why am I saying it is correct? Friends, I am an auditor. I am using the work of an expert. Where I am using the work of an expert, an expert is not a part of my engagement team. Please understand. Expert, Deep Gupta, it is opposite. Expert is not part of an engagement team. You are writing that expert is part of engagement team. No, expert is not a part of engagement team. Why is the expert not a part of engagement team? The auditor uses the work of an expert to carry out the audit work. Fine, fair enough. The auditor is the expert carries out expert's work based on his or her standards, but auditor cannot say these are the quality control standards based on which you have to do your work. No, that is not something that the auditor or audit team can dictate to the expert. So the expert is not subject to the quality control policies and procedures. But remember carefully, even though I'm saying that expert is not subject to quality control procedures, the expert has to carry out the assignment in a qualitative manner, and that we will check as a part of our audit, which we learn under Essay 620. Okay, so this is a short question. Now, let us look at some case studies which appeared in the past examination questions. Now, look at this point, friends. Very, very important question I'm discussing. This appeared multiple times in CA Inter as well as CA Final. The question is, statements and guidance notes of ICAI, are they mandatory or recommendatory? Discuss. Is it better to answer questions by paragraph or point? It is always better to answer them in a point by point manner. Point by point does not mean you will just break it up into small sentences. That point, whatever you are explaining, it may have 2 or 3 sentences also. But all those points, all the sentences you bring under one point. Okay, right. Now listen carefully. After I complete my discussion of Q&A, I will open up. I'll open up for your questions more and more. But just look at this. I'm discussing some super important points here. What is the difference between statement and a guidance note? When I talk about statement, many people don't know this. Even practicing chartered accountants, unfortunately, don't know this. When I say statement, statement refers to standards, right? They could be standards on auditing, SA, we call them. They could be SRE. We learn these in CA Final. SAE, standards on assurance engagement. SRE, standards on review engagement. Then they may be SRS, standards on review. Right. So like this, there can be many standards. We call those standards as statements. Okay. Right. Now, after having these statements, or after understanding what these statements are, tell me, are these statements, what is the purpose of these statements? ICAI provides clarity for the members to carry out a test function. I am using some words. I know very carefully why I am using them. ICAI is giving guidance to the members or clarity to the members on a test function. What is the meaning of a test function? I want these words to appear in your examination paper. A test function means the signing responsibility. Understood? So, for members to carry out the signing responsibility, Institute of Chartered Accountants of India gives for critical areas these statements. How should you deal with going concern assumption? How should you deal with the statutory auditor using the work of an expert? How should you deal with the statutory auditor using the work of another auditor, like a branch auditor? So these are super critical areas. So on these super critical areas, Institute provides specific mandatory guidance in the form of statements. So when you have SA, SRE, SRS, then SAE, all those are mandatory in nature. Are we absolutely clear about it? So for CA Inter, you just remember SA, standards on auditing, are mandatory in nature. Wonderful. Now, come to guidance notes. What is the purpose of these guidance notes? Friends, guidance, as the very word indicates, generally guidance notes are the best option or preferred option. Let me not even say best option. Guidance notes are preferred option which the institute suggests to the members. So guidance notes on something like we want to do audit of fixed assets. Institute provides guidance note on audit of fixed assets. Now, guidance note on audit of fixed assets will give us a way in which you can do the audit of fixed assets, but it is not that that's the only way in which you can do the audit of fixed assets, because an audit is a process of persuasion. It is not a process of proof. When I say that an audit is a process of persuasion, if you cannot get audit evidence in one manner, you will find other ways in which you can get that audit evidence. So guidance notes are generally recommendatory in nature. But listen carefully to what I'm saying. If the council, when I say council, let us just understand ICAI. If ICAI specifically says that this guidance note is mandatory in nature, that guidance note also you should consider as if it is mandatory in nature. Otherwise, generally guidance notes are recommendatory in nature. Even though they are recommendatory in nature, let me tell you, friends, you will very rarely have any alternative better than what guidance note tells you. So if there is something which is given in the guidance note, it is difficult to say that, oh, I can do an audit in a manner which is better than what guidance note has suggested. Very rare, very, very rare. So considering that, when you have guidance notes, you have to read those guidance notes and the procedure. So you know what you will have in guidance notes? The summary of different standards on auditing and other points which you learn, how you have to apply in a specific situation. You will have guidance. Maybe the Companies Act angle to it, the Schedule 3 angle to it, then the dimension of standards on auditing, all these points, accounting standards, if they have spoken about something, all those put together you have as a part of your guidance notes. So I strongly suggest that when you have guidance notes, you have to consider them as recommendatory in nature, but don't neglect them. You have to definitely read them. Okay, right. So you will have to explain that the statements which are mandatory and this which is recommendatory in nature. Right. So this appeared for 5 marks in one of our past examinations. Now, let me talk about a question which appeared in both CA Inter as well as CA Final. Now, look at this, friends. What do you mean by written representations as an auditor? How will you deal if management does not provide written representation? The same thing can even be like a case study where they say ABC Limited did not provide written representations to auditor. Comment as an auditor in the light of standards on auditing, how you would deal with it. So the same question can even appear as a case study. So this question appeared in our CA Inter as well as CA Final. Concentrate carefully on what we are discussing. This is about written representations. Can anybody tell me written representations are covered by which standard? Anyone? Written representations. Respond, yeah? Good. So we got Cherian and Ritika, Anihita, Rahul. Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I think a lot of people are responding that it is from SA 580. Perfect. It is from SA 580. Now, just listen carefully. The heart of SA 580 is this question. The crux of it. SA 580 on written representation says that, hey, financial statements are the responsibility of management. They are the responsibility of management. So preparation of financial statements, who is doing? Management is doing. Auditor is carrying out an audit on the financial statements prepared by management. Okay, right. Now, wonderful. I got it, friends. Thank you. I really enjoy when you are participating enough in these discussions. And so, friends, listen carefully. So the auditor asks management to provide in writing to the auditor that whatever responsibility management was supposed to carry out, whether management actually carried out its responsibility properly or not. That is what the management wants from the auditor in writing, and that is what we call as written representation. So it is a confirmation of the management's, it is a confirmation from management that it actually carried out its responsibilities regarding financial statements, and that financial statements are prepared in accordance with applicable financial reporting framework. Okay, right. Ritika, no mnemonics. It's very simple. If you just think about the logic, you can understand beautifully what this is about. Okay, right. Will this lecture be available on YouTube later on? Yes, Tanuj, it will be available. But if you have any questions, it will be good if we are discussing them, right? Okay, right. Hold on now. So here, how do you approach this question? So first, you should talk about SA 580, and you have to just give this brief. It is a written statement from management about what these points, what I just now discussed, and then you should talk about. Here, the question is, if management does not provide written representation, how will you deal with it as an auditor, right? So friends, if management does not provide written representation, it amounts to limitation on auditor's scope of work. Did you understand the point? It amounts to limitation on auditor's scope of work. So if it amounts to limitation on auditor's scope of work, the point is the auditor will generally give disclaimer of opinion. You understood? If it amounts to limitation on scope of work, auditor provides disclaimer of opinion. Achha. So auditor asked management to give written representation. Management did not give. So auditor should reassess whether any additional audit procedures have to be carried out. Auditor should understand the reasons why management is not providing the written representation, and the auditor should ultimately decide whether disclaimer of opinion is appropriate. Did you understand why disclaimer we are talking about? Are simple here. You say, for example, you created a mobile phone. I am asking you, hey, is the mobile phone created properly by you? And you're saying, I don't know. I'm a person who is certifying agency. I'm somebody giving a report on whether you prepared mobile phone properly. Are you as a manufacturer, if you can't give assurance on that, as an outside quality control agency, I come and check this. How can I just give a comment on that? So if management does not give written representation, then auditor does not own up the responsibility on the financial statements. Did you understand the logic? So that is one point. And now let us look at one more very important question which appeared again in May 2014 examination. This appeared for 6 marks. So look at the question. The question is, the auditor is responsible for maintaining an attitude of professional skepticism throughout the audit. Do you agree with the statement? Okay. So before answering this question, I want to talk about how you have to approach questions on standards on questions relating to standards on auditing for your examination. Just give me a moment. Right. Now, listen carefully, friends. All your questions on standards on auditing, which are like the points which I discussed, the way I planned is first half an hour, I wanted to discuss questions which are shorter questions which you need to answer, because half of your questions which appear in examinations will be like this. Then in the second half of what we are going to discuss, I will actually do bigger case studies which will help you understand how you have to approach. Now, when you have questions like this, examiner is expecting straight to the point answer. So the question here is, the auditor is responsible for maintaining an attitude of professional skepticism throughout the audit. What is the meaning of professional skepticism? In which standard do we learn this? In SA 200, we learn professional skepticism, right? So the auditor, regarding professional skepticism, what do we learn in SA 200? We learn that professional skepticism is state of alert mind. It's an alert mind what an auditor should have while carrying out the audit, right? Why is that alert mind important? The auditor does not start the audit with an assumption that with an assumption that auditor is, what is this? Yeah, vigilant mind. Yes, right. So auditor does not start the audit with an assumption that there is a problem. The auditor does not start the audit with an assumption that there is no problem. Then with what mind does the auditor start the audit? with clear, unbiased mind, but an alert mind. What do I mean by alert mind? If there are instances of fraud or error, the auditor should catch hold of them and start digging into the details. So that is what I mean by alert mind. Okay. So if there are instances of any fraud or error which the auditor notices, or if there are fraud risk factors or any possibilities which the auditor notices, auditor has to dig into it. Now, what is the objective of an auditor? To express an appropriate opinion on financial statements as a whole. The auditor has to use professional skepticism throughout the audit, because when you are obtaining audit evidence, you need to have that kind of professional skepticism to understand whether the auditor is getting sufficient appropriate audit evidence or not. Similarly, when the auditor is examining audit evidence, even then auditor has to have professional skepticism to evaluate whether the audit evidence what we are getting, whether it is reliable, or on that basis whether we can express an opinion or not. And finally, when different pieces of audit evidence what you get, you put together and you form an audit opinion, even at that point auditor has to have professional skepticism to check and evaluate whether auditor should do more work or whether auditor obtained sufficient appropriate evidence. So that professional skepticism is one thing which actually is throughout the audit process. Okay, so you have to explain these points in detail. All right, now let me take just a 3 minutes break and we will resume. You know what we will do when we resume? We are going to discuss case studies, bigger case studies. So in the first half, what we discussed is examination questions which can appear from standards on auditing, which are just 1 sentence questions or 2 sentence questions. Now we will start looking into case studies, how they appear, and more tips to answer examination questions on standards on auditing. We are going to see after about 2 to 3 minutes of time.